Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest in the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today I have Raphael Fritsch on the line, and he's CIO over at Root Capital. And this episode is part of our iConnections New York series, where we bring you the best of those that attended iConnections or are attending iConnections in New York and who participated in the past. Raphael, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right, so we got a lot to talk about today. We're going to get into a discussion about private credit in Brazil. Is there opportunity? If so, where are you seeing it and why? So we'll get into that and more. But before we do, we'll start this episode with our Mission Matters Minute. So, Raphael, at Mission Matters, our aim and our goal is to amplify stories for entrepreneurs, for executives, for experts. That's what we do. Raphael, what mission matters to you?
Well, what mission matters to me is helping Brazilian companies that have risen to exist, but to struggle to access financing. I started my career in the late 90s when the credit market in Brazil was pretty much non-existing. There was no real credit funds in Brazil back then. I was fortunate to join JP Morgan's first Latin America analyst training program in New York, and later worked in credit markets in London with Bank of America, Deutsche Bank, and eventually helped to build Aragras, a global hedge fund. By 2010, I felt the Brazilian market somehow had matured enough to create something meaningful at home. I returned to Brazil and founded Root Capital, a credit asset management firm focused on providing long-term capital to companies facing financial stress. Since then, we've participated in some of Brazil's most important restructurings and bankruptcies, supporting businesses that had decent operations but limited access to financing. In many cases, that meant preserving companies, protecting jobs, and helping business recover rather than actually disappear. That's what mission matters to me, is like using capital not just as a financial tool, but also a way to help a good company survive, grow, continue contributing to the economy while still in a way delivering returns to our investors.
That's wonderful. It's great. Love bringing mission-based individuals on the line to share why they do what they do, how they're doing it, and what we learn from that so we grow together. So great having you on. Switching focus here slightly, let's get into iConnections. So tell me about the connection. Have you been in the past? Is this your first time? How'd you get introduced to the organization?
Well, I've heard great things from colleagues. It's one of the major Gap Intro conferences in the world. I was early this year in Miami, and it was a unique opportunity to meet a lot of very quality investors and present the Brazilian opportunity. It's not every day you get like 40 meetings in 2 days, and we're able to present what we believe is a very unique opportunity today in Brazil.
Yeah. Well, talk about that for a second, because for someone that's not acclimated iConnections, 40 meetings in 2 days, that's a good use of time. Talk to me about how that took place.
Well, you basically have this unique setup where you have 30 minutes meetings. You basically go through an app where you can actually see who's going to be involved, who's going to be around, and you really see who actually wants to know more about, in my case, credit, about Latin America, about products that have a track record. And there's an opportunity for like in 30 minutes to present that and see if it's worthwhile pursuing follow-ups and diligence, and everything goes after that, those first 30 minutes.
Now, was Miami your first event, or like have you been to others? And the reason why I asked this question, I guess, let me position this slightly differently. So, what keeps you coming back? Like, what keeps you coming back?
I mean, number one thing is like, well, as you said in the beginning, I mean, there was no real credit market in Brazil like 20 years ago. And the opportunity set in Brazil is very much one of that, of more long duration capital, of more experienced investors in both high yield and distressed debt products, which you need to have a very qualified audience. So when we get a chance to speak to over 20 endowments, foundations, pension plans, you have that audience that really understand the product, really understand the risks involved, not just from a credit risk, but also from a liquidity profile, shapes and formats of the funds. So it's a really unique opportunity to get all that in 2, 3 days and maximize both from the LPs and the GP standpoint.
Yeah. Switching up here a bit. So let's get into the market in Brazil. What are you seeing and why do you see opportunity?
Well, Brazil presents a very unique opportunity today. We're a country of more than 200 million people and one of the largest economies in the world. Yet we currently have interest rates close to 15%. That's our Fed fund rate. So the highest, like among the highest globally. And this is pretty bad for credit in companies. No wonder corporate bankruptcies and restructurings right now are at record levels in Brazil. Credit expanded really fast over the last few years. Many families are heavily indebted. And we're once again entering a polarized presidential election cycle. We have a unique election at the end of this year. All this creates a very challenging environment for Brazilian companies. What makes it worse is that traditional banks have become increasingly reluctant to lend to anything other than super high grade names. Meanwhile, many alternative credit managers like ourselves have struggled to raise fresh capital. So firms like Root Capital, which have patient, long-term capital and deep restructuring expertise, this creates a pretty unique opportunity. We can be highly selective. We can kind of dictate structure and earn attractive returns while providing critical capital and financing to companies that need a partner, not just a lender. In many ways, some of the best investment opportunities emerge when capital is scarce. And that's exactly the kind of environment we're operating today in Brazil. So this creates what we see, a very unique and interesting opportunity in Brazil.
Go a step further into maybe, and you could do, I don't know if it's by industry or what, but like where in the market are you seeing that opportunity? Is this like what size of companies or otherwise? Like, well, where do you see the opportunity? Like, what excites you the most right now?
I think a couple of things. I think the first one is actually the market structure.
Mm,
The total high yield market. So all the high yield funds right now in Brazil, if you add
mm.
all the capital of these funds together, is about $3 billion. And
Wow.
Brazil's GDP is about $2 trillion.
Yeah, yeah,
So
that's
there's literally
yeah, I didn't see. So you're like the whole thing is opportunity. I got you. Go ahead,
exactly,
please. Go ahead,
exactly.
please. Like it isn't even when you said isn't existent or it's not like there's a lot. I get it now. Go ahead, please. That's very helpful.
Yeah, and like the guys that typically provide long-term capital, think about the endowments, the foundations, the pension
Mm-hmm.
plans in Brazil. These guys, the Brazilian Fed fund rates, as I said at the beginning, is 15%. When you have inflation of 6, that's a very high real interest rate. So most
Yeah.
of the long-term capital, they rather buy government bonds than do anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So like a lot of the restructurings, the long-term capital needs are not really satisfied. They're not actually they can't source that kind of capital from the usual suspects.
Mm-hmm.
So firms like ourselves that are able to raise long-term capital from patient investors, we in a way, I mean, you're fishing from a huge pond. So there's so many
Yeah.
deals that we can source from. So when you ask about which industries would be
Yeah.
lucky, we're more like of a, where is the best opportunity right now? Where the loan to values are low? Where can I
Mm-hmm.
really dictate pricing structure and help those firms cross the finishing line while protecting capital to our investors? So think about real estate. Interest rates are horrendous for real estate. So
Mm-hmm.
15% base rate is really bad. Cost inflation is pretty high right now. So and access to financing is very tough. So therefore, real estate, which is a massive industry, is suffering. And I could
Mm-hmm.
go on for each and every single industry. But when the country is paying 15% on your base rate, the
Mm.
entire country is in a way a special opportunity in a way.
Hmm. When you're in a meeting and you're talking to someone, I'm just trying to be a fly on the wall here, and you bring up that 3 billion, that 3 billion mark, like number, and I mean, I'm not claiming I know every industry, every market, everything else like that. I never claim to be a subject matter expert. I just ask the questions, Rafael. I'm curious, like, what kind of response do you get to that?
Well, yeah, the first thing is like, well, I'm in Brazil. So,
Yeah.
I mean, even
Obviously.
though
No, I mean, when you're like at somewhere like iConnections or we're in the US or somewhere else. At home, I know I would imagine that the people that should know. I mean, like other places. I'm curious what the response is.
I think most people are a bit at first surprised.
Yeah.
Obviously, the opportunity set. I mean, Brazil. If you think about if you need to invest in emerging markets, I mean, if like Russia, China, India,
Hmm.
and Brazil's there. So we're one of
Hmm.
the big options you have, and one of a liquid market as well, if you will. But then again, if you look at the percentage of assets allocated into Brazil from most international investors, is
Hmm.
very limited.
Hmm.
And the opportunity set is big. So, and when you see that very limited long-term capital on the ground, I think people are very surprised. They're
Hmm.
surprised to see what, I mean, they're surprised, but in a way, when I ask them, like, what other managers? I mean, a good question, like, how many Brazilian managers do you think, Adam, are going to be at iConnections?
Hmm.
Probably we're going to be the only one.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think most investors are typically surprised with the scarcity of capital in Brazil.
Hmm.
Number two is like very few firms have a 16-year track record like we have. Most asset managers in Brazil, especially in the credit, on the private credit and the special situations of high yield asset classes, are very new. Track records very limited. Deal flow is very scarce to show what they've done. So I think like the first thing we have to do at these kind of conferences is a little bit of the educational to
Hmm.
show that Brazil is an addressable market. There is a track record. Rule of law does apply. So it's a very like it's a credit market that, as I said at the beginning, is very new,
Hmm.
but it's sizable and it's been working. So I think like
Yeah.
once investors see that there is teams on the ground that are able to source opportunities, they're able to structure opportunities, and at the end of the day, are able to show a long track record of deals that have been invested and harvested. And at the end of the day, you can see an IR and the benefits of those transactions. I think people got surprised. and they want to
Mm.
do follow-ons. They want to do
Yeah.
diligence. They want to come to the ground to visit. Like we got offices in both Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo. So I think that's happening. I think like
Yeah.
events like this are great events to actually show the opportunity set, show who's actually doing what they're doing on the ground, how they're doing. So hopefully this was going to be a pretty productive 3 day sessions in New York next week.
Speaking of the deals, and you're welcome to take this in general terms, or if you want to get specific and talk about one that, that's public or anything else like that, you're welcome to. But what are you looking for in a deal? Like when you're thinking about deploying capital?
I think the first thing we're looking for is capital protection. So we got to make sure we've got four very experienced lawyers at Root Capital. So we want to make sure that if everything goes south, we're protected. So that can be in many shapes and form, but the main one would be collateral package, especially if you're lending to companies that are not your classic high grade names, so the best companies in the world. You're lending or you're buying credit from stress. You want to make sure that the documentation is being reviewed, the collateral package is there. So your typical loan to value is approximately 30%. That
Mm.
means you're lending 30% against a potential 100% collateral. So the value of the collateral might fall by 10, 20%, and you're still
Hmm.
very well protected. Number two, I mean, we're dealing with Latin America, we're dealing in Brazil. So you want to make sure that your compliance department has done a thorough review of who you're dealing with, who's on the other side. You want to be doing deals with companies that have a real reason to exist, as I said at the beginning. And that
Hmm.
starts with the partners in the business, the directors in the business, the shareholders in the business. You want to make sure you know who's on the other side of the table, because at the end of the day, a loan, a credit is an instrument between us and the other side. If the other side
Yeah.
fails to pay, you have to deal with them. So you want to make sure you deal with good people, people with a
Hmm.
good background, good track record. And obviously, you want to make sure that business has a real reason to exist. It's got cash flows, it has an ability to pay you and deliver what we kind of project going forward and be able to help that business grow. So, I mean, we want to make sure that we protect our downside, but we do have an upside that we can really count on. And the beauty, like in Brazil right now, as I said, the limited capital is for every 30 deals we look, we do one. So
Mm.
you can be highly selective in Brazil simply because, well, again, unfortunately, it's very limited competition. And unfortunately, again, because of such a high interest rate environment, there are so many companies facing financial
Hmm.
distress now. So the opportunity set is quite high with limited competition. In a way, you dictate price and structure.
Mm. And this has been great. First off, Rafael, it's great having you on the show today. I learned a whole lot. I was not. It's just one of my favorite things about covering eye connections is getting to see what like different opportunities, what different people are doing. Bring that to my audience, of course, but then learn about markets that maybe you haven't considered and otherwise. Like I'm sure there's some other people that had some aha moments listening to this. They're like, "Oh, wow, I didn't think about that." Like, so I'm not the only one. Everybody listening, there's a lot of listeners. So for those of you that are saying I knew that, okay, fine, you knew. But that being said, Rafael, how do people, if they want to learn more, if they want to follow up, learn more about Root Capital or follow your work, how do they do that?
Well, our website is rootcapital.com.br, that BR for Brazil. We have a LinkedIn page as well for Root Capital. Myself, I do post from time to time some significant developments in the marketplace, as well as my business partner, Felipe Nehemiah, and also iConnections and conferences like that. I mean, we're happy to grab a coffee and talk to people about the Brazilian opportunity, which we believe is it's an amazing moment as it presents itself right now.
Fantastic. And for everybody listening, just so you know, we'll definitely put some links in the show notes so that you can connect with Rafael and his team. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. You heard me correct. Each and every day, we're bringing you new content, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way in your journey as well. So hit that subscribe or follow button. And Rafael, thanks again so much for coming on.
Thanks so much. It's been a lot of fun. First time doing this kind of podcast, Adam. So thanks for having me.